He's a very useful player to have, but he's not going to get you, I don't think, ever 15 plus goals in a season.
He's been really, really important to this Arsenal side at a time when there are question marks over who is best suited to that number 9 role.
Actually, it's the responsibility of VAR to tell them that it's the wrong call.
Welcome back to Monday Vibes, everybody. Hope you're doing well and had a nice weekend. Of course, this is the show where we round up the biggest talking points from the weekend of football just past and give our take on it. Dougie Critchley to my right, as usual. Weirdly enough, I'm on hosting duties this week. Mixing it up. How are you? How was your weekend?
Good, thank you. I'm good. It was a weekend of real contrast. I met my nephew, which was very sweet. He's about 2 weeks old. Then went to a rave at Drum Sheds, this new sort of... they've turned an IKEA into this massive rave venue, which was a lot of fun on Saturday for Joe's 30th, which you sadly couldn't make because you were being a rock star again.
I was being a rock star, yeah. I had a big band rehearsal on the weekend.
Gigs coming up soon?
Well, a gig coming up. So yeah, any of you watching who aren't too weird, I will probably put the link to my gig on Instagram, and who knows, maybe some FD fans will turn up. But yes, so yeah, jam-packed weekend for us both, and it was a jam-packed weekend, of course, in the Premier League as well.
Huge.
Liverpool, Man City on Sunday, of course, also Aston Villa Spurs on Sunday as well in the race for the top 4. It really did feel like the biggest weekend of Premier League football this season, at least building up to it. But Dukes, I mean, despite the scoreline, I think Liverpool, Man City really did live up to the hype. You know, Pep Guardiola and Jürgen Klopp's last Premier League meeting. For now, well, no, probably forever. Forever. Because Klopp's not coming back to the Premier League, is he? At least in his words. Yeah, Dukes. I mean, what did you make of this?
As you say, like a really thrilling game, thoroughly entertaining. I think we might have seen slightly better quality games between these two in the past, but it was, in entertainment-wise, I thought it was absolutely excellent. To be honest, I mean, the first 10 minutes was all City. And I was sitting there watching it with Greg, my father-in-law, and we were both like, this is really one-sided, like surprisingly so. Then from then on, I thought City had some chances, which we'll get onto, but Liverpool played exceptionally well, I thought. I thought they made City at times look pretty disorganised, like not so fluid on the ball. And yes, there were some opportunities. You know, Doku hit the post late on. Foden hit the bar when Kelleher sort of punches the ball into his head.
Quite fortunate.
Yeah, you can't really give any credit to Foden, but it did still hit the bar. It nearly went in. But other than that, I thought Liverpool were absolutely brilliant. And I think particularly some of their midfield players as well. You know, without Curtis Jones, who I think has probably been their outstanding midfielder this year, I thought Mac Allister was brilliant. I thought Endo was probably his best game in a Liverpool shirt, to be honest. Szoboszlai slightly quiet as well. But given the fact that Trent is injured and Salah was only fit enough to be on the bench in this game.
I mean, Szoboszlai only just about fit enough to start himself, given his recent injuries.
But given the fact Trent and Salah, who are probably their two best attacking players at least, weren't really fit to play too big a role in this game, I thought they were absolutely excellent. And not just playing in that kind of harem-scarum, really energetic Liverpool way that we saw in the initial Klopp years, like actually building up really nicely, lovely passing moves, like possession-wise, edging City at Anfield. I thought it was really, really impressive. And if Luis Diaz had a better day in terms of scoring, you know, this could have been very one-sided. It could have easily finished 3-1. I don't think anyone would have had too many complaints. And given the fact that they went behind in this game as well through that excellent worked corner, really smart move. Ake blocking Mac Allister, the ball in from the ball in 2 stones from De Bruyne is really, really smart. I thought it was really, really impressive from Liverpool. But to be honest, having said all that, I think City will be the happier team and Arsenal will definitely be the happier team as well. So it felt like, even though it was a draw, Liverpool won the day, but I think City kind of won overall because they got a point away at Anfield, having played quite way off their best, I think.
Yeah, I think so, absolutely. I think you're right there. City probably more happy. Well, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because I think before the game, Liverpool probably take the draw because they had the much more understrength side. But given the performance, I think, City much more happy with that point. Liverpool should have won it in the second half. They were absolutely brilliant, like you said. And it is notable that now, you know, what was it, 2-3 weeks ago in the Carabao Cup final, Endo and Mac Allister coming up against, I think, a more star-studded midfield, a more informed midfield, a more first-choice midfield. I know it's Chelsea, but still, you know, Enzo Fernandez and Conor Gallagher and Caicedo on their day are a really formidable midfield trio. And, obviously coming up against KDB and Bernardo Silva and Foden and, Rodri. And Stones behind them, before the game, most people say, well, the midfield battle is going to be won by City. In both these instances, Liverpool very much won the midfield battle. I think Endo and Mac Allister, 11 tackles and interceptions between them on the day. I think Endo's been absolutely brilliant this season. He's really, really grown into his role. And I think at the start of the season, I think we had actually a conversation about Mac Allister on Team Talk at the start of the year. And not to blow my own trumpet, but I wasn't that bowled away by Mac Allister. And I think the argument for Mac Allister being underrated was, well, he's doing a really good job as a 6.
So was the question, is he underrated or overrated?
Underrated or overrated? And I think I said that he was overrated mainly from his time at Brighton, which is debatable. I can hold my hands up. Maybe I was wrong there, but I think the main argument was that he was doing a really good job in the 6. And my argument to that was, well, why don't they just play Endo in the 6 and play Mac Allister in his best role? Which I think at the time, because Endo was a bit more of an unknown quantity in the Premier League, didn't really go down so well with the other people on the show. But he's shown that he is a really, really good 6, and also just a really good ball player as well. I think he completed 95% of his passes on the day, and that's not just sideways passing. I think he's got a really good connection with Luis Diaz. He knows exactly when Luis Diaz is making the run, and his balls, into that left channel, are brilliant. Props to Endo. I think he really, controlled this game, which given the kind of money that has gone around for the midfielders in the teams that we're talking about today, City and Liverpool, and he only cost 20 million euros from Stuttgart, a relegation threatened Stuttgart. It really is something, and another sign of how well Liverpool have recruited this year, especially compared to City. I know we were talking about City's recruitment on Sunday Vibes yesterday. Go and check that out if you haven't done so already. But also on yesterday's Sunday Vibes, Belinda, who was on us on the show, a big Liverpool fan as well, made the very good point of Liverpool, when they've lost out on the league to City by a couple of points in those 2 title races, 2018-19 and 21-22, both those seasons they failed to beat City, and they failed to beat City once again. 1-1 away at the Etihad, 1-1 here at Anfield, and it's played into Arsenal's hands massively. They go into the international break now, Arsenal top of the league on goal difference over Liverpool, 64 points each. Arsenal seven goals better off on goal difference. They're now 11 points better off on goal difference from Man City. But Opta's prediction thing,
which I'm a little bit. I'm not a full believer.
I'm not a full believer. But it still has Arsenal with only an 19% chance of winning. But it is interesting, the swing after this weekend. Arsenal's swing has gone up by almost 6%, and City's has gone down by almost 6%. So that is pretty telling, I think. And of course, it sets up the City-Arsenal match in 2 weeks' time really, really nicely. Is it 2 weeks' time? No, 3 weeks' time. Sorry, after the international break. I guess we need to talk about the Edison challenge in the first half. I mean, that really set the tone for the second half, I think. First of all, Nathan Ake has generally been a great left back for City over the last 2 years, but a poor back pass from him, and then Nunez, who again I thought statistically didn't really look great in this game, but I think in terms of what he brings to the Liverpool attack and brought in this game in particular, I think he was an absolute threat once again.
There was one really delicious moment where the whole play was going left, and it looked like he was going to flick it around the corner too. I can't remember who was making an overlap on the left. He flicked it back the other way to Luis Diaz, and it's a really good one-on-one chance. Another one for Luis Diaz. Yeah, no, absolutely. He was really good at kind of kicking off attacks in the Liverpool half, and then I think we'll get on to Luis Diaz as well. I thought he was absolutely brilliant in the second half as well, despite missing those chances. I think the thing is with Luis Diaz, and it does feel like he's coming back into it, but when Liverpool signed him back in 2022. And those early performances, also what he'd done at Porto as well. But those first 6 months, I genuinely thought, not only have they replaced Mane here, but I think they might get someone who will be better than
But since that injury, which, you know, obviously struck him quite early in his Liverpool career, I just don't think I've seen him hit anywhere near those heights since. It feels laughable now to compare him to Mane. But there are still signs. You know, he had a really good battle with Kyle Walker. He completed 4 dribbles on the day. You know, he's such a... I don't know, I think he's a really special player to watch. And, you know, he's got his kind of mix of, you know, dribbling ability and skill, but also with that physicality, that kind of bull-like nature that he has as well. I think it's an amazing mix, but I've just seen his first touch let him down so many times this season, and I think there's just something. I think it feels like it could click again for him, but there are just certain elements of his play that he really needs to just like fine tune.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like, yeah, he could have had a hat trick in this game. It turns out he only had 2 shots, both off target. In this match.
The particularly big one, I think, is when Salah plays that amazing through ball, and he's quite clear of everyone. He takes a reasonably good first touch as well, and then just sort of spoons it wide. And you're just like, Mane at his peak would score that. He just would score that, and you had no doubt that Mane would score that. He'd either go round the goalkeeper or even tuck in at the near post. Mane was just so good at that at his peak. And yes, Mane did slightly dip off in his final year, 18 months at Liverpool. He also got moved around positions as well, ended up playing a lot more centrally as well. But Luis Diaz, it's not just the injury as well. You know, he obviously had that situation with his father earlier this season. It's not been particularly easy for him at Liverpool. And Liverpool, through luck, I think, really, well, we said that they left their midfield under strength for years, and they kept on signing forwards. Do you remember there was like 2 windows back to back, and they signed Jota, Gakpo, Luis Diaz, and it was just relentless for Nunes, and it was just relentless forwards. But thank goodness they did now, because they've now got such a deep forward line. But it feels like Jota has stepped up this year, Nunes has stepped up this year massively without Salah in so much availability as usual. But Luis Diaz, if they're going to get over the line this year, they need kind of everyone to step up, because Gakpo is not an elite goal scorer. He's a very useful player to have, but he's not going to get you, I don't think, ever 15 plus goals in a season. Whereas Luis Diaz, I think, has potential to get up to those numbers, but he just lacks that killer instinct at the moment, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he has been scoring recently as well. Like, he has been overall, I think, playing some of his best football in a couple of years. But yeah, just that in a big game like this, could have done with him being really on song there. Speaking of the forward line, I thought Elliott was very useful. You know, obviously has the thankless task of playing in Salah's position, but I mean, I kind of forgot just how quick he is and how big an engine he's got as well. Did you see that in the second half where he like chased down? I guess it was Ortega at that point in the Man City goal. Almost pulls off a Johan Wissa, which we'll get onto in a little bit. Almost pulls that off, and then runs the entire length of the field back to right back to kind of try and thwart the City attack that results from that. Absolute engine on the guy, and I think I guess it's not really been this season, although we have seen kind of moments from him. But I do feel like next season may be the season of Harvey Elliott where we really see him explode.
Couldn't agree more. I just thought of something we absolutely need to talk about, and Liverpool fans were screaming at their screens.
We were waiting. I mean, we haven't got to stoppage time yet.
No, we've kind of been meandering through, but that was a big moment, and it felt like a weekend of huge
in the title race, a huge call.
Yeah, and big call in the Arsenal game, which we'll come on to with Havertz and that dive. But Doku, that is a high foot.
I don't understand. It was only after actually watching the highlights back again this morning, after having watched the full game yesterday, that it was Michael Oliver who was actually if you're gonna count on any ref to get a big call like that late in a game in a title, potential title decider in that kind of atmosphere, you want Michael Oliver to be there with a perfect view, and Michael Oliver was there with a perfect view and somehow doesn't give it. And I think people moan a lot about VAR and whatnot, but I think this is completely with Michael Oliver, the on-pitch referee. I think if Michael Oliver gives that, then VAR do not overturn it, because it's, in my view, it's a penalty. He doesn't give it. I think VAR could have overturned it, but it still leaves that possibility for VAR to overturn it. And I think there's a lot of chat. Well, there was a lot of chat about Doku getting the ball originally. I think now it seems to be the consensus. Actually, it hits Mac Allister's chest first and it goes on to Doku. I guess there's the other argument about Doku pulling out. So the intention's not necessarily there, but
I kind of think it's irrelevant.
The stud still hit him in the chest. Yeah. It's still dangerous.
It's one of those challenges that even if he gets a nick on the ball, the foot is so high.
It doesn't really matter
going
who gets
into
the ball
his chest.
first.
I don't think it really matters whether he gets a tiny touch on the ball. It's not an excuse for
that.
I think it is really dangerous.
I think it matters more that he was. I think there's more of the better argument is that he was clearly trying to pull out of it, but it doesn't. Again, it doesn't really matter because he doesn't manage to do that. It's still a mistake. It's still a foul. It's dangerous play. You know, we've seen a player get given a red card for that. It was in the box late, and the only thing I can think of is that maybe, you know, Oliver froze a little bit and was like, I'm not 100% sure, and it's the last minute of a title deciding game, and if I do give this, it's huge. But I think, you know, not giving it is just as big a decision, and it was the wrong decision.
But that is still, as you say, that is still making a call, because then VAR have to react to whether there's enough evidence to overturn it. And I think they probably should have overturned it, but you can see why they don't want to. There's just been so many examples of VAR in the last few years where they don't want to. They almost think it's embarrassing to tell a referee that they made the wrong call, when actually it's the responsibility of VAR to tell them that it's the wrong call. And I think this was fairly obvious. I think it was fairly obvious.
I think it was obvious as well. And I think the way you know it's obvious as well is that, like, watching it back in real time, like when you see that motion, even like from the view that you have it as the viewer, where you're not quite sure what's happened, but when you see that motion of like a high foot, someone at chest level turning like that and falling, like, I can't remember watching a game where I've seen that and it not be instant. I can't remember a game like that. I had almost like a muscle memory reaction of like, oh yeah, pen's coming.
Yeah. I also don't think the Liverpool players made that much of a meal of it. I think because the ball was still live and that, you know, it was the last couple of minutes, they needed to press for it. But I don't know. I was surprised how little they made of it during the game, and, you know,
it was only after.
It was only after, really. But I'm not saying they made a mistake in that. It was just a huge moment.
Called it. I mean, he did call it. Potentially defining referee decision there in the title race. But I mean, it absolutely sets up the Man City Arsenal game brilliantly. But yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As imagine most of you will have thought that was a penalty. Do you think that's going to be, well, I mean, it is significant, isn't it? It's denied Liverpool 2 points there. Where do we want to move on to next? Should we stay on the title race, or do you want to go, should we veer to Aston Villa Spurs?
Does it make sense to stay on the title race? Should we just do
let's do it. Arsenal Brentford 2-1. Kai Havertz with the 86th minute. I mean, shall we quickly get that out of the way? Because Kai Havertz, again, a huge decision that has impacted the title race this weekend, in my view, shouldn't have been on the pitch.
Yeah, it's a dive. I think it is a dive, and I think
very clear dive.
I think it wasn't. I think everyone. I don't think I've heard anyone say it wasn't a dive. It was just a call that they got wrong. And it's a huge moment, and it's frustrating, and it's not just frustrating for Liverpool and City in the title race, it's frustrating for Brentford, because their form at the moment is really pretty bad. I think since the 3rd of November, they've only taken 10 points, which is level with Burnley and Sheffield United as the worst in the league. And they do have an absolutely vast injury list of really key players in that squad, you know, Mbuemo, Norgard, Mee, Pinnock, Hickey, it goes on and on. Rico, Henry, they were all missing in this game. But they gave Arsenal a couple of issues, but it was really Arsenal sort of giving themselves, making this a little bit more nervy than they needed to with that huge Aaron Ramsdale error. But given he made that error, I think he does consistently show a lot of character to come back and actually made some really good saves, particularly from the Nathan Collins header. Yeah. I think the Ivan Toney volley was absolutely sensational effort, but I think he should save it.
He should, but then he's still caught off his, like, the ability to get back into the right position, and also, you know, I think it is pretty great, like, because there are other goalkeepers that get caught out by that, and it's an amazing strike. Like, if that I think that's heading in, and that's heading in at like that. That would have been probably goal of the season.
And it's curling away into that sort of top corner area. It was a really, really sort of amazing moment. I haven't seen. There's not too many players in the league that would try that, but Ivan Toney, he just knows where he stands in this Brentford team. He loves the big stage. He's against the club that he's been linked with joining so many times. He probably just wanted a big moment, and it was really, really impressive. But Arsenal, we talked on Sunday Vibes relentlessly about the form they've been in. 31 goals in those 7 league games in 2024. Before this one, this was entirely different. Much more nerve-wracking. But 2 great goals, to be fair, and 2 great assists from Ben White as well, who I think is having. Well, I think he's not been as sensational as last year, but actually in the last month or so, I think he's
getting back to that form.
He's really hit his best form at a crucial time, and it's such a shame that he had that falling out with Steve Holland, because he's a really useful player, and I think he'd be a great addition to the Euro squad. With Maguire's form up and down this year, he's not going to starting, but he'd be a great player to have, given the fact he can play in a back 3, he can play at right back, he can play at centre back, he could probably do a job at left back. He's just a very good all-round footballer, and he can play in midfield actually. But for Arsenal, job done, McCubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 players who we spoke about a lot on Sunday Vibes, Declan Rice and Kai Havertz, making the difference. Of course, like we said, Kai Havertz probably shouldn't have been on the pitch for when he scored late on, but it once again showed. I guess Arsenal's character. Especially like you say, like Aaron Ramsdale, not being deterred by what was a really poor mistake from him, letting Johan Wissa close him down like that, and in general, just things, the performance maybe not being one of their best recently against a struggling Brentford side, who did cause them issues. But I guess like what we were talking about kind of yesterday was that Arsenal have had a lot of games won by half time recently, and yet I think going into this game, after the game, I think Arsenal have won more points in the final 5 minutes of games. I think it's them and perhaps Liverpool who top the league for that. I think they've won 10 points from scoring 85 minutes onwards. So they do have it all. Like, they can still conjure that up late in games as well, which I do think gives them a big advantage. They've been able to save kind of emotional and physical energy by putting away teams that they should have put away generally over the last 2 months. But when they have faced adversity, even if it did require a little bit of luck as well, in terms of a refereeing decision, they were able to pull it out of the bag here too. Like a great header from Kai Havertz, and once again showing why he is really, really invaluable to this Arsenal side. In some ways, I feel like Havertz, unless Arsenal actually win the league this season, it's hard for him to win in some ways, because there will always be a month or two where he's not contributing as much in front of goal, because he's maybe playing a bit more in the midfield and having to take up on more defensive responsibility. Maybe he's having to do more kind of ball progression work, which I don't think he necessarily... That's not necessarily his specialism, or at least it's not where he shines. And so I think, in some ways, no matter what happens over the next 2 years, I think there will always be specific, especially Chelsea fans, being like, "Oh, he was a waste of money. You did us a favour." But the reality is, he's Arsenal's second top scorer this season. I've lost count now how many winning goals late in games he's scored. I think 2 or 3 in the Premier League. Like, he's been really, really important to this Arsenal side at a time when there are question marks over like who is best suited to that number 9 role. And Kai Havertz has played in that role recently, and he's got 4 goals in his last 4 games. Like, I don't think there's much more he can do at this moment in time. Yeah,
I think it's been really, really impressive. I think that's 4 Premier League games he's scored in a row. He's one of those players that, even at Chelsea in his darker periods, he was still getting picked a lot. Like, he obviously... Managers who are much more intelligent than us, much more intelligent than you guys watching, really value what he brings to a side. And he's been picked regularly under pretty much every manager he's ever played. And that goes for the national team as well. Like, he's been a regular there for years. So he clearly has a lot more value than you can necessarily always see with the naked eye at all times. But I think it's potentially because he's not like a shot monster, but he gets off shots. He's not massively creative, but he's fairly creative, and he can dig in with defensive work as well, and he's got a good aerial presence as well. But he's not necessarily standing at any one thing, but he's very good at a number of things and can play a number of positions. And I think he's a very useful player to have.
For sure, and I think his when he's at centre forward, the fact that he can't necessarily barge defenders off the ball that always
he doesn't have those
people.
power moments that people are their jaws drop and they're just wow, those Haaland style moments, or even Ollie Watkins or something. He's just a less impressive physical specimen. But let's move on to the final game we're going to talk about today. Huge game in the race for the top 4. There was also some useful, a lot of the bottom, just before we get onto this, a lot of the relegation threatened side picked up points this weekend. Bad weekend for Forest. I think all the bottom 3 drew. Am I right in thinking that? Man United got a kind of scrappy 2-0 win, conceding 20 goals at home for what must be the 20th time this season.
20 shots.
20 shots, sorry. Did I say 20 goals?
20 goals, yeah.
That would have been mad.
Could have been 20 goals. But
that would have been fun. But let's talk Villa Spurs, because, Mikey, I caught this, but you saw what happened really, that it was a real game of, such a cliche, a real game of 2 halves.
Yeah, absolutely. Villa could have been 1 or 2 up in the first half. It was really all them, and Ollie Watkins providing a great threat once again. Mickey van der Ven I thought was absolutely excellent in that first half. The value he brings to this Spurs side is brilliant.
And gets that injury.
I'm not sure if he's how long he's out for with that, but Spurs fans were obviously hoping it's a speedy recovery. But I think in the end, and we speak about Van der Ven because he was out for a significant portion of the season and has been great since returning. But I think it was, a real sign of how strong this Spurs side are in the end when they have a fully fit squad there. Pape Sarr, setting up James Maddison. James Maddison looking great once again. Heung-min Son, excellent game. But in the end, 4-0 really flattered Spurs. I think it was 2.3 to 1.2 in their favour on expected goals. But it was just those moments where their top players stepped up in that sense. Kulusevski as well, I thought had a really good game. And Villa in the end also exacerbated their misery by having their one of their biggest leaders in the dressing room putting in an absolutely stupid challenge on Destiny Udogie. I think when I saw that, I almost laughed. It looked comical, how bad that challenge was. And when you talk about a cynical foul, that's pretty much the epitome of one.
Yeah, and he's not really like that as a player either. And he's a really well-respected professional. I think he is. He's on-pitch captain at the moment. I think it would be Mings when he's fully fit, but. McGinn is the sort of spirit of that side, and for him to lose his head so dramatically,
it's such a big game as well.
When they were only 2-0 down, I think at that stage as well. Although they were becoming increasingly ragged at that stage. I only watched the final 40 minutes of this game because I was doing a Mother's Day celebration and eating waffles, which was great as well. But anyway, the final 40 minutes of this game was so one-sided, and the red card happened, and then Spurs just really clicked into gear, played some amazing stuff, everyone combining so effectively, just cutting Villa to shreds. And Emery deserves a little bit of scrutiny for this, because he did change system. They don't have Boubacar Kamara at the moment. They went to a 3 at the back, and it didn't work. It really didn't work. Spurs were fully prepared to press high, as they always do, and go man for man on those 3 men centre-backs and leave those wing-backs effectively free, or let their full-backs pick up on them. And Villa just struggled to play through them, and they lost their heads. Tielemans was struggling to make an impact. McGinn reacted to that with a really poor challenge. And every Spurs forward contributed, really. Timo Werner had a really nice finish. I think on his 28th birthday. Can't believe he's only 28. Feels like he's been around for about a decade and a half. But he was brilliant. Brennan Johnson with another goal as well. And they've now got, I think, 4 players who have contributed over 10 league goals this season for Spurs. And Heung-min Son's now on 14 goals and 9 assists. I think only Watkins, Salah and Haaland have contributed more. That's pretty impressive, given the fact he had the Asian Cup as well and has changed around position. I think Postecoglou has done he's got a lot of credit this year. But because he's not involved in the title race, which is taking up so much airspace, I think he's gone slightly under the radar in the last month or so. They have really turned it around after a dodgy period. They've had huge stretches with injury. They obviously lost the best player in their modern history in the summer. They didn't really sign an out-and-out replacement. And you talk about Sarr, Porro, Bissouma, the improvement he's got from players that were there last year that were struggling really last year under Conte, I think is remarkable. And Spurs are now in the driving seat for top 4, I think. They're still behind Villa, but they do have that game in hand, which is against Fulham away this weekend at 5:30. There's like 4 or 5 Premier League games this weekend. It's a really difficult one for any FPL addicts. But Villa, I think, tired as well from midweek. Ajax on Thursday away, then Spurs on Sunday, and they do have a small squad with a few injuries as well this season.
Do you think this all could define the top 4 race? The fact that Spurs don't have anything else to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen it in the past. You know, when Antonio Conte's Chelsea won the league, they didn't have European football. Some managers, I think it is so good for the fans qualifying for Europe, but almost if you're not going to go deep in it, for the league, it has such a detrimental effect at times. You know, Brighton this year lost a number of key players, have struggled really with that league and Europa League balance at times. And I think Villa are struggling at the moment really with that consistency. I mean, I've got some of the stats down here. Since that 1-0 win against Arsenal on the 9th of December, they've kept 2 clean sheets in 12 league games and conceded 21 goals in that time. They've conceded 3 or more on 3 occasions. So they're just a little bit ragged at the moment. They look very tired, and it's to be expected, but Arsenal fans will be screaming at their screens saying, "We told you so." This is Emery's second season, which I don't subscribe to, but it is a well-round or well-known sort of Twitter sort of statement that goes around.
Yeah, I mean, that's silly, isn't it? I mean, he's had an excellent season. They have had an excellent season. If Villa were 8th right now, we'd be saying they've had a decent season.
Absolutely.
And they're still 4th. Like,
also, the amount of cups he's won in his career, he's not really a second half of the season struggle guy.
Nah, definitely not. And who knows? Maybe they go on and win the Conference League. I mean, yeah, I think it's a case of resource, isn't it? Like Villa's squad is actually quite underrated in how deep it is in certain positions, but it is still not really a Champions League squad quite. They've got some Champions League players in there, but it does not match up. I don't think it even necessarily matches up to Spurs' squad quite across the pitch, especially given that they've had Mings out the entire season, like the amount of significant injuries they've had in key positions. Yeah, like I don't think you can really put too much on Emery, aside from, like you said, he probably approached this game in the wrong way. But yes, and who knows, maybe this won't even matter because maybe England will get the 5th spot.
Maybe.
And despite
Need
that,
a little turnaround, actually. The midweek results weren't great last week. I mean, West Ham losing, Brighton getting thrashed, Villa going 0-0. Liverpool obviously did really, really well, but with United and Newcastle already out of Europe, you know, pressure's on a little bit. Pressure
is on Arsenal and City to get that coefficient up for sure. But that's all we have time for today on Monday Vibes. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. How big a bearing could those refereeing decisions in the Arsenal and Liverpool games have on the title race, and what do you think of the top 4 race as well? Who's going to win out of Aston Villa and Spurs? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like, subscribe to Football Daily if you haven't done so already, and we will see you later in the week.